morning.
Good morning. Okay.
We're in Maseches Shekalim, Perek Daled. Excuse me, we're in Mishnah Vav. We're going to try to learn today Mishnah Vav and Mishnah Zayin. Neither Mishnah Vav and Mishnah Zayin are directly related to Maseches Shekel, but they come off and are connected to the Masechta based upon the Mishnah before that. Mishnah Hay, we learned yesterday. It was a bit confusing. What do you do with the Ketores that was bought with last year's Maseches Shekel? And today is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. You can't use the Ketores anymore for the Mizbeach because it was bought with last year's money. And you can't let private people use the Ketores either, and you don't want to sell it. What do you do with it? So we went through the Mishnah Behira on page 30, the chart, the four-step process. You use a Maseches Shekel, you sort of take the Kedusha off the Ketores and put on the Maseches Shekel. The Maseches Shekel was supposed to pay for people who worked on making the Ketores, etc. Went through the four-step process. The idea in that Mishnah was, what do you do with Hekdish that you can't use? We got a process called Chilul. Chilul Hekdish means taking the Hekdish and redeeming it onto money. And now the money is Hekdish and the article is not Hekdish. So flowing on that concept, we're now going to learn two Mishnayos, again, that are not directly related to Shekalim. But in order to understand these two Mishnayos, you need to understand there's something in the Beis HaMikdash. There's two types of Hekdish, two general categories of Hekdish. One is Kodshei Mizbeach, things that have been sanctified for the altar, meaning basically Karbonos. It could also be Ketores. Things that are sanctified for the Mizbeach are called Kodshei Mizbeach, sanctified for the Mizbeach. Then there are things called Kodshei Bedek Habayis, things that have been sanctified for the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. So if somebody can say, my Chevy should be Kodesh, my Chevy should be Hekdish. Well, you can't bring the Chevy on the Mizbeach. So therefore, we understand what he means to mean, I want my Chevy to go to the treasurer of the Beis HaMikdash. The treasurer of the Beis HaMikdash is going to auction off the Chevy, and the money from the auction he's going to use to basic upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. That's Kodshei Bedek Habayis. Kodshei Mizbeach, the things that are sanctified to go on the Mizbeach. A person can say, I want to sanctify this animal to be a korban. This korban is an olah. This animal is an olah. Or this korban, or this animal is a shlomim. Or this animal is a toda. Or this flower will be a mincha offering. A person can do that. But a person can't say that this Chevy should be a korban. When a person says the Chevy should be Hekdish, it means that the Gizba is going to auction it off, and he's going to use the money for the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. So the Mishnah, the next two Mishnayos, Perek Daled, Mishnah Vav, Mishnah Zayin, which begins on your Mishnah Behira on page 31, says the following. One is Kodshei Mizbeach, and one is Kodshei Bedek Habayis. Bedek Habayis means upkeep of a house. So the Mishnah says, Hamakdish Nechosa. Someone says, my belongings should go to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, in his belongings, there may be animals, there may be computers, chairs, tables, cars, flatware, china, jewelry, could be all kinds of things. He says, my possessions should be Hekdish. In the many possessions, this is how we're going to learn the Mishnah to keep it simple. He has, my possessions are going to be for hektish. There's a car, computer, chairs, flatware, china, jewelry, clothing, etc. He also owns, and we're going to learn the Mishnah simple, samamone ketores. He doesn't have the ketores itself. That's a difficult case to imagine that a private person owns the actual mixture and blend of the ketores, which a person's really not supposed to own. So we're going to learn the Mishnah, as many Mefarshim do. We're talking about samamone ketores. He has the different spices and incense that are used in the mixture, in the blend, to make ketores for the Beis HaMikdash. Some of these are very expensive. Some of these may be a bit rare. He has these things. They're not mixed into ketores yet. They are the ingredients to make ketores. So he says, my possessions are hektish. He's got the car, he's got the flatware, he's got the computers and the table and the chairs and the jewelry and the clothing. And he also has ingredients to make ketores. And ketores is something that can be brought on the Mizbeach. So what do we do? Since he said all these things are going to be hektish, and there are so many things in there that can't be brought on the Mizbeach. You can't put your car on the Mizbeach. You can't put your table and chairs on the Mizbeach. We assume that what he wanted to do, according to this Mishnah, we assume what he wanted to do is he wanted things that have to be sold, and the money goes to the Bedek Habayis for the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. And those things that can go to the Mizbeach should find their way to the Mizbeach. The problem is, how do you find your way to the Mizbeach? The money is supposed to go, where should the money go? To the Bedek Habayis. Okay, so we have a situation where the car is, he says, everything I own is going to be hektish. The car is not an issue. It's going to go to be sold. The china, the furniture, the clothing, the jewelry, they're not a problem. It doesn't make a halachic issue. There's nothing we can do with it because stam kodesh lebedek habayis. When a person says, I want something to be hektish, and he doesn't say, is it bedek habayis or is it mizbeach? According to this Mishnah, we're going to assume that he means bedek habayis, upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. So if he says everything I own is hektish, so everything is going to go to the Bedek Habayis. It doesn't create a halachic problem because when you say everything is hektish without saying what hektish you mean is Bedek Habayis. Okay, so everything should be Bedek Habayis. So we're going to sell his furniture and his clothing and his jewelry and his car and his table and his chairs and his flatware and his china. We're going to take the money, bring it to the Gizbar, and the Gizbar is going to have a lot of money now to maintain the Beis HaMikdash. But amongst those things, he has also these kind of ingredients as an example that can be used to make ketores. But you can't just take it from him and use it for ketores directly. Why? Because we just said that presumptively everything goes as money to the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. So how do we convert the ingredients of ketores into money that can then go to the Bedek Habayis? So this is what we do. Hamaktish nechasav, the Mishnah says, someone makes his possessions hektish, and presumptively that means for Bedek Habayis. And amongst these things, there was something that can be used as a public offering. We're not dealing with animals. Animals will be the next Mishnah. And he has these ingredients for ketores. So the car and everything is just going to be given to be sold. The money will go to the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. But what do we do with these things? Yinasnu la'umanim b'schoram divrei Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva says, you take the ketores, the ingredients of ketores, and they're really supposed to be for Bedek Habayis. How are we going to turn them into money? We're going to take them, the Ketores, and give it to workers who've done work. Let everybody be patient, okay? These are difficult halachas, and they're not machzis hashekel halachas. So we're going to go through them to the best we can without going through them in great depth, but we need to be patient. Animals will be dealt with in the next Mishnah, and the Mishnah after that, Mishnah Ches on page 33, will be talking about wine and flour. We need to be patient. We're sort of not in Masechta Shekalim right now. Okay, we're in another Masechta, and we're going to try to learn the Mishnayos as best we can. So we're going to take Rabbi Akiva. This is different Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, take this ingredients for the Ketores, give it to workers who have done work in the Beis Hamikdash and who are owed money for the work they've done, and give them this Ketores. What kind of Ketores is this? It's Ketores of Hegdish. It belongs to the Bedek Habayis. Right? The money is supposed to go to the Bedek Habayis. So Rabbi Akiva says we can do a direct transaction here. We can take this Ketores, which is supposed to go to the Bedek Habayis, and pay for upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. We're going to take that Ketores and give it to workers who have already done work to upkeep the Beis Hamikdash. We're going to give it to them. Step one. Now they have this Ketores, and we're going to now take machzis hashekel and buy those ingredients back from them, and now it becomes ingredients for the Beis Hamikdash. That's Rabbi Akiva's case. Now, yesterday's case was very different than this case. Yesterday's case was Ketores was bought by the Gizbor from machzis hashekel. So it's hektish. That Ketores is absolute hektish and is supposed to be burnt on the Mizbeach. The Gizbor went out and bought Ketores. Today is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Last year, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, or during the year, the Gizbor took machzis hashekel, bought ingredients for Ketores, and the people in the Beis Hamikdash made Ketores out of it. That Ketores must be burnt on the Mizbeach. Problem, today is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, I can't use it anymore. So what do? I have to go through the four-step process we learned about yesterday. That's because that Ketores was already bought with machzis hashekel, and therefore becomes designated as hektish for the Mizbeach. Yesterday's Ketores was bought with the Mishnah we learned yesterday was Ketores bought with last year's machzis hashekel. The only thing you can do with that Ketores is burn it on the Mizbeach. But I can't because today's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So we had to go through a four-step process to rejuvenate and renew that Ketores so I can use it in the coming year. That's yesterday's Mishnah. Today's Mishnah is a private person said everything I own is hektish. My car, my computer, my chair, my jewelry, my clothing, everything is hektish. And he also has the ingredients for Ketores there. So this is not something that was bought with machzis hashekel. Yesterday's case, Ketores was bought with machzis hashekel, and the Ketores can't be used anymore because today's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Different case. Today is a private person saying everything I own is hektish, therefore presumptively it's Bedek Habayis. So how do we convert this Ketores into Ketores that we can bring on the Mizbeach? So what we do is, Rabbi Akiva says, take the Ketores it is holy. It's Bedek Habayis holy, but it's not ready to be brought on the Mizbeach because it's Bedek Habayis holy. Bedek Habayis holy means that just like the furniture has to be converted into money, and that money used for the Bedek Habayis, these ingredients have to somehow be converted into money to be used for Bedek Habayis. So we're going to go through a shorter process. Rabbi Akiva says, take this Ketores that's hektish, and you can give it to the workers in the Beis HaMikdash and say, here's your pay for work you did in the Beis HaMikdash. After all, this Ketores is supposed to be for Bedek Habayis, and these folks did work in the Beis HaMikdash. Here's the Ketores. What do we do now? These people own the Ketores that is Bedek Habayis. So now we take Maxis HaShekel, we buy it back from them, and now the Ketores that we bought goes on the Mizbeach, and the money is going to belong to the workers. So this is going to end up being sort of a split case. This is going to be a split case in the sense that the furniture, the car, all these things are going to be sold with the money going to the Bedek Habayis. And Rabbi Akiva says, since there is this ketores in these things that's hegdish, and we'd like to get this hegdish to become worthy of being on the Mizbeach, the way we're going to do that is we're going to take the ketores and give it to the workers. And now the workers have been paid for Bedek Habayis, so we kept the word. This private person said, focus. This is not that hard, but it's a stage 1 and a stage 2. Everything I own is hegdish. Rabbi Akiva holds that means everything should be for Bedek Habayis, the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. The furniture, the car, the jewelry, everything's going to get sold. The money's going to go into the treasury of the Beis HaMikdash to pay for upkeep, not for korbanos. Amongst the things that this private person owned were ingredients that can become ketores. We'd like to take those ingredients and be able to use it to burn on the Mizbeach. But we can't. You can't take those ingredients and burn it on the Mizbeach because the presumptively that ketores really needs to be sold so that the money can go to the Bedek Habayis, because it all should be Bedek Habayis. So what do? We take the ketores and we give it to the ingredients, we give it to some workers who deserve to be paid for Bedek Habayis. So what have we done with this ketores? We've done exactly what that private person wanted. We converted his car, jewelry, suit, everything was sold for Bedek Habayis. And what did we do with the ketores? Bedek Habayis. We gave it to some people who did work in the Beis HaMikdash and paid them for the work with the ketores. Everything's perfect. Everything's been used for Bedek Habayis. How do I get that ketores back from these workers? So now I can use it on the Mizbeach. I'm going to pay the workers from the Maseches HaShekel and buy back the ketores. So everything's been satisfied. The ketores was initially used to pay the workers for Bedek Habayis. The Beis HaMikdash bought it back from these workers, and now it can go on the Mizbeach. That is Rabbi Akiva. Amalo ben Azai. So Ben Azai said, Eina min Hamida. You're not being consistent, Rabbi Akiva. In other words, Ben Azai wants to apply yesterday's Mishnah of the multiple step purpose to today's Mishnah. Although yesterday's Mishnah was a case where ketores was bought with Maseches HaShekel, and the year is up, and I need to figure out how I can still use that ketores this year, so I need the 4-step process. Today's Mishnah has nothing to do with ketores that was bought from Maseches HaShekel. It's talking about ketores that a private person ended up making hektish along with everything else he owns, and therefore Rabbi Akiva says it's an easier process. Ben Azai says, Einam hi hamida. This is not consistent with what we learned yesterday in the last Mishnah. Ela mafrisha mehem schar ha'umanim. Ben Azai says, I want you to do the same thing we did yesterday in the Mishnah. Separate money from the person's possessions that it's going to pay for the schar of the workers. It's the exact same virtually the same exact 4 steps as yesterday. You trade it, you take it back again, and then you buy back the ketores. We went through it yesterday. We're not going to go through it again. It's on page 30 of your Mishnah Behira. In other words, we have a machlokas here. Yesterday's Mishnah is real Kodshe Mizbeach. It belongs to the Mizbeach. Machtas HaShekel was used to buy ingredients for ketores. The ketores was mixed and made into ketores. And now you have ketores that needs to be brought on the Mizbeach. But it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, I can't use it anymore. So how do I convert last year's ketores to be this year's ketores? So I have the 4-step process of yesterday. Today's Mishnah is some private person said everything I own should be hektish. That means bedek habayis. It goes to upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. I have a slight problem here. Yesterday's problem was I have ketores that belongs to the Mizbeach that I can't use anymore. I have ketores that belongs to the Mizbeach that I can't use anymore because there's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. How do I convert last year's ketores to this year's ketores? It's all about Mizbeach. Yesterday's Mishnah, 4-step process. Today's Mishnah has nothing to do with the Mizbeach. A person said everything I own is hektish, which means it should go to bedek habayis. The money should go to upkeep the Beis HaMikdash. However, amongst those possessions, there happens to be these ingredients for ketores, which we'd like to use to make ketores and burn on the Mizbeach. But I can't do it. Because when the owner said everything is hektish, it means everything is hektish and the money goes to upkeep. I cannot sell this ketores, the ingredients, and use it on the Mizbeach. I'm sorry, I can't take the ketores and just put it on the Mizbeach because it's bedek habayis. I need to convert it into money. How do I convert it into money? So the Rabbi Akiva says you give the ketores to the workers who are owed money. Therefore, you satisfied bedek habayis. The money was used to upkeep the Beis HaMikdash. Now buy it back with the Machtas HaShekel. Everyone's happy. The workers got paid. The Beis HaMikdash has now bought new ingredients for the ketores. Different case than yesterday. Comes Ben Azai and says, I don't like this shortened process. The same process that was used yesterday. Be machalal the work on part of the things that this private person was makdish, and then go through all 4 stages that we went through yesterday. The end result is going to be the same. The end result is that the workers are going to get Machtas HaShekel, and the Beis HaMikdash is going to be able to use the ingredients for ketores on the Mizbeach. The question is, can you short-circuit the process? Rabbi Akiva says yes, because we started here with private ingredients. We didn't start here with ketores as we did yesterday. Ben Azai says no shortcutting this process. If you want to convert bedek habayis into Kodshe Mizbeach, you need to go through the 4-step process. Okay, Mishnah Zayin. So Mishnah Zayin, we're going to go through it quickly, and then we'll take a look at the chart on page 32. Same kind of case, except now we're talking about a person who is makdish everything he owns, and amongst the things that he owns, there are things that are absolutely roy for the Mizbeach. The Mishnah we just learned a couple of minutes ago is dealing with a person who's makdish everything he owns, and it happens to be amongst the things he owns, he has a couple of spices that can be used in ketores. And we'd like to use those ingredients for ketores on the Mizbeach. But I can't because the money needs to go to bedek habayis. So that's the discussion in the last Mishnah. But what happens if a person is makdish everything he owns? He's got the car, the jewelry, the clothing, the table, the chairs, the computer, everything. But he also has cattle. Now, cattle, animals, you can bring directly as a carbon. But can I? when a person says everything I own should be hektish, we said presumptively everything goes to bedek habayis. What do I do with these animals? Do I sell the animals and give the money to the Beis Hamikdash? Do I try to bring these animals of korbanos? What do I do? And it's going to be a three-way machlokes in the Mishnah. Hamakdish nechasa v'hoisa behem behema ru'uya legabe hamizbeach zechorim u'nekevos. Someone says everything I own is hektish, and he has amongst his possessions male and female animals. That's a good question. Who is the halacha like? The halacha is like Ben Azai, not like Rabbi Akiva, which is quite shocking because in all of Shas we have a rule that whenever Rabbi Akiva speaks, the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, except if there's a majority against him. So in a one-on-one machlekes, we're going to always paskin like Rabbi Akiva. Not only that, but Ben Azai is a student of Rabbi Akiva. So here we have a very unlikely case that Rabbi Akiva disagrees with only one person, as far as we see in the Mishnah, although in truth it's a much larger machlokes. Rabbi Akiva disagrees with only one person, according to the Mishnah Ben Azai, and Ben Azai happens to be his student. Nevertheless, the Rambam paskins like Ben Azai for reasons that are explained in the Shekalim and the Rambam. Okay, so in this Mishnah, Mishnah Zayin, meaning the halacha is like Ben Azai, you need the four-step process, even if it's private hegdish. Mishnah Zayin. Somebody makes everything he owns hegdish, but now he's got animals, male and female animals, that can be brought as korbanos. But we can't bring it as korbanos because, what did we say yesterday? What did we just say a few minutes ago? When a person says something is hektish, presumptively that means it should go to the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. It doesn't mean that he wants it to be a korban. Somebody says, I want something, I want this animal to be a korban. He says, I want it to be a korban. I want this animal to be a shlomer. I want this animal to be a toda. I want this animal to be an ola. Somebody says, doesn't talk the language of korbanos. He says, what I own is hektish. Presumptively, he means sell it and give it to the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. So now, amongst these animals, amongst the possessions, there are animals. What should we do with these animals? So, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, the first opinion of the Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer. Zacharim yimachru letzarchei olos. You sell the male animals, and now the Beis Hamikdash has money. And you sell the money for tzarchei olos, meaning someone needs, private people are looking to buy an animal for an ola. And we're dealing now with the male animals. You take the male animals and you put up a for sale sign. The Beis Hamikdash is selling male animals for a korban ola. Okay, korban ola has to be a male animal. So people come to the Beis Hamikdash and say, "Yeah, I want to bring an ola." Okay, 20 shekel. The Beis Hamikdash now has 20 shekel. What will the Beis Hamikdash do with that 20 shekel? They're going to use it for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. And what will that animal go for? That animal will end up being a korban ola. So this is a tricky case. This Rabbi Eliezer says, I agree that when someone says hegdish, he means hegdish for the bedek habayis. He means hegdish for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. That's what he means. However, if amongst his possessions there are animals that can be brought as a korban, we're going to see to it that there's a korban that comes out of it. But we have to do it in a way that the Beis Hamikdash gets its upkeep money. So what are we going to do? We're going to take the male animals and put up a sign that the Beis Hamikdash is selling animals for a korban ola, and people who need an ola, they go and they buy an animal from the Beis Hamikdash. So the animal will be sold and it will end up on the Mizbeach. And the money will end up in the hands of the Gizba for the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. Everyone's happy. So although the word Hekdesh means upkeep for the Beis HaMikdash, we're going to satisfy two things here. The furniture will be sold, money to the Beis HaMikdash. We don't care what you do with the furniture. Jewelry, money goes to the Beis HaMikdash to upkeep. We don't care what you do with the jewelry. Animals, male animals, because they can be used on the Mizbeach, we're going to try to put them as karbonis on the Mizbeach. But first we have to get money for the Bedek Habayis because that's the real intention. So we're going to sell the animal, money to Beis HaMikdash, animal to a person who needs a carbon ola. Una kevos, what do you do with the female animals? You sell it to people. You put up a sign and say, Beis HaMikdash has female animals. Anyone that needs to bring a carbon shlomim, they're available at the Beis HaMikdash. The person buys the shlomim, the animal, for 20 shekel. Beis HaMikdash has now 20 shekel to spend on its upkeep, and the animal ends up actually being a carbon. And the money that they get for selling the male animal for an ola or the female animal for a shlomim goes to Bedek Habayis. So the furniture money goes to the Bedek Habayis. The purchaser of the furniture, you can burn the furniture, do whatever you want with the furniture. Animals, because amongst the person's possession, when he said everything is hektish, there were animals, and that animal really needs to be used for Bedek Habayis. But since it's an animal, and it's royal carbon, we'd like to convert it so that it should be a carbon, but we need it for Bedek Habayis. So we're going to sell it, take the money, put it into the coffers of the Bedek Habayis. The animal will be a carbon ola, the female animal will be a carbon shlomim. That's Rebbe Eliezer's sheet. So Rebbe Eliezer's sheet is, if someone's makdish all his possessions and there are animals amongst the possessions, the male animals are sold for ola, the money goes to Bedek Habayis. Female animals sold for shlomim, money goes to Bedek Habayis. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Rabbi Yeshua holds just the opposite. Rabbi Yeshua holds that stam hegdish is lemizbeach. He says just the opposite. When a person says everything I own should be hegdish, or he says things should be hegdish, the word hekdesh means holy. Holy means he wants it to be a sacrifice. He wants to be a carbon. But amongst those things, there are also tables and chairs. No. So what are we going to do? We can't sacrifice table and chairs. So Rabbi Yeshua says, Zachorim atzmam yikrevu oilos. The male animal should not be sold and the money goes to Bedek Habayis. When someone says, my possessions are hektish, and amongst those possessions there are animals that can go on the Mizbeach, presumptively this person thought it through. He knew that amongst his possessions there's tables and chairs and animals. And presumptively he meant that the animal should be brought as a carbon. Therefore, we're not going to sell the animals, give the money to the Bedek Habayis, and then use and let someone else use it as a carbon. The owner himself, when he said everything's hektish, he meant that the animal should be a carbon from him. So Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Zacharim atzmam yikrevu olos, unekelos yimachu letzorchei zivchei shlomim. The male animals you're going to bring as a carbon ola itself, and the female animals unekevos yimachu letzorchei zivchei shlomim v'yavi b'dmeim oilos. Yeshua has an interesting sheet. Yeshua says when a person owns a lot of things, and he says everything should be hektish, unlike Rebbe Eliezer, who said presumptively hektish means upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash Bedek Habayis, Yeshua says no, the word hektish means carbon. That's what a person means when he says hektish. Now, what kind of carbon does a person mean when he says, I want everything that I own to be hektish? What do we do with the animals? Rabbi Yeshua says presumptively the person meant that his animal should be an ola. An ola is kuloi lashem. An ola is completely brought as a sacrifice for Hashem. Everything's burnt on the Mizbeach. The Kohanim do not eat any part of it. The owner doesn't eat any part of it. The only part that's given out, the hides of the korban ola given to Kohanim. Other than that, it's kuloi lashem. It's all for God. Therefore, Rabbi Yeshua says, when a person says, everything I own is hekdesh, what he means is everything should be used in the most godly purpose possible. His table and chairs are going to be sold and the money's going to go to Bedek Habayis. His animals that can be used as a korban should be used as a korban ola, completely for God. So the male animals, you just sacrifice as a korban ola. Female animals can't be brought as a korban ola. So what do you do now? You sell the female animals, you have the money, you take the money and buy male animals, and you bring additional korban ola. So Rabbi Yoshua says that presumptively hekdesh means hekdesh for the Mizbeach. So I'm going to take the male animals and make it a korban ola, completely hekdesh for God. What do I do with the female animals? Sell them, take the money, buy male animals, and make them korban ola too. So Rabbi Yoshua Omer Zechorim Atzmam Yikrevu Olos. The male animals themselves are brought as an ola. Unekevos, the female animals, Yimachu Letzorche Zivche Shlomim. They should be sold for the purpose of Tzorche Zivche Shlomim. V'yavi Bidmeim Oilos. And with the money you get from those animals, you're going to buy male animals, and you're going to bring a korban ola. And whatever else is there is bedek habayis. The table, the chairs, everybody holds that the table, the chairs, the jewelry, everything. When a person says these things are hekdesh, he means it's bedek habayis. The question becomes when amongst the things he's makdish, there are things that can actually be sacrifices. What did he mean about those animals? So Rabbi Eliezer, the first opinion Mishnah said that you take the animals, you sell them, and you take the money for bedek habayis. You don't have to, the animals can be sold to someone else. He can bring it as an ola. You're going to use the money for bedek habayis. Rabbi Yeshua says, no. Do not sell these animals. The owner intended that these animals should be brought as a korban for himself. What's the difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua? Rabbi Eliezer, a person says, everything I own is hekdesh. Okay. Amongst those things, there are male and female animals. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer says, as far as I'm concerned, those animals need to be converted directly into money, and the money goes to the upkeep. Because that's what the person wanted. Even the animals, the value of the animal should go to the upkeep. So therefore, we're going to sell the animals, and the money is going to the bedek habayis. As far as the owner is concerned, what's the only thing that the owner gave to the Beis Hamikdash? We'll call him Reuven. Reuven said, everything I own is hekdesh. Rabbi Eliezer says, what are we going to do? We're going to take his car, his furniture, his jewelry, his china, his silverware, clothing. We're going to sell it all, and the Gizbar is going to get money to upkeep the Beis Hamikdash. Reuven also had animals. What do we do with his animals? We're going to sell his animals. And we're going to give that money to the bedek habayis too. At the end of the day, what did Reuven do? He gave a lot of money to the bedek habayis, but didn't bring any karbonos. Everything was converted into money that went to the Gizbar. Rabbi Eliezer says, since it's possible to sell the animal, and the animal can still become a korban, that's what you should do. So the Gizbar is going to sell the male animals for those who need an ola, and the female animals for those who need a shlomim. That has nothing to do with the owner. The only thing the owner gave to the Beis Hamikdash was money. Shimon walked into the market with the Beis Hamikdash and said, I need an ola. And the Gizba said, terrific, we have a male animal that was given to us as Hekdesh Bedek Habayis. 20 shekel. Shimon gives the Gizba 20 shekel. The Gizba now has 20 shekel to spend on Bedek Habayis. That's Reuven's donation of 20 shekel to the Bedek Habayis. The animal that Shimon just brought is going to be Shimon's korban olah. Everything that Reuven gave to the Beis HaMikdash ends up being money Bedek Habayis because presumptively that's his intention, according to Rabbi Eliezer. But since we have a way of taking this animal and leaving it as a korban, so that's what we do. We sell it to people who need an olah or shlomim. So the animal ends up on the mizbeach as Shimon's korban. What did Reuven donate? Only money. Rabbi Yeshua doesn't hold that way. Rabbi Yeshua says that when Reuven said everything is hekdesh, it means everything that can't be brought on the mizbeach should be sold. My furniture, my clothing, jewelry, everything sell and give it to the gizbar. But my animals, when I say everything should be hekdesh, animals doesn't mean sell my animals. Excuse me, Reuven doesn't think I want you to sell my animals. Presumptively, his intention is what? My animal should be a korban. And what kind of korban? An olah. It's hekdesh. It's all for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the male animals will be brought as a korban. A korban for who? For Reuven. According to Rebbe Eliezer, Reuven didn't bring a korban. Everything got converted into money, and everything that Reuven gave was money. According to Rebbe Yeshua, Reuven gave money. Those male animals will be brought as a korban olah for Reuven. And the female animals will be sold, and the money will be used to buy male animals as a korban for Reuven. So according to Rabbi Yeshua, Reuven donated money and also brought korban olah. According to Rabbi Eliezer, all the money went to the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. According to Rabbi Yeshua, some of the money went to the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash, and some of it were kabbanas for Reuven. Those are the two sheets. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva says, Roa ani es divrei Rabbi Eliezer mi divrei Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Akiva says, I understand better Rabbi Eliezer than Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer holds that everything converts to money, and Rabbi Yeshua says some things convert to money and some things become karbanas. So Rabbi Akiva says, I understand Rabbi Eliezer better. Rabbi Eliezer hishve es midasai, Rabbi Yeshua cholad. Rabbi Eliezer to me is consistent. Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Eliezer says what? When a person says hegdish, he means bedek habayis. And everything that he owns, we're going to convert into money for bedek habayis. Consistent rule. I say everything is hegdish, everything becomes money, and Reuven donated a lot of money to the bedek habayis. End of story. But Rabbi Akiva says, what do you do with Rabbi Yeshua? Rabbi Yeshua says, well, let's take a look. He said everything should be hegdish. And now we're going to parse his words. The things that can be sold will sell, and that will go as money. The things that are animals, we're not going to sell. That'll be kachem mizbeach. So what has Rabbi Yeshua done? Rabbi Yeshua said that the man who said everything should be hekdesh meant two different things at the same time. He meant that which can't go on the mizbeach, sell, and that which can go on the mizbeach, make it into a korban. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says, when a person says everything is hekdesh, means make it into money and give it to the Beis HaMikdash. So Rabbi Akiva says, I see Rabbi Eliezer's sheet better than Rabbi Yeshua, because Rabbi Eliezer is consistent. Person said this is hekdesh, you can do the same thing with everything, convert it to money. On the other hand, Rabbi Yeshua says some things will become money and some things will become karbanas. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. So we only have two shittas right now. Comes now Amar Rabbi Papias. Rabbi Papias says, Shamati kedivrei shneim. I've heard from my rabbis that both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua are right. But there are different cases. In one case, Rabbi Eliezer is right. and in one case Rabbi Yeshua is right. Shahamakdish beferish kedivrei Rabbi Eliezer. If someone uses the following words, my animals and my other possessions should be hegdish, there the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, because he separated, you don't have to parse words. He said, my animals and my possessions are hegdish. By saying two things, my animals and my possessions, we assume that Rebbe Eliezer is right. The animal should be karbanis, and the possession should be sold for the bedek habayis. But in the case that we've been talking about, everything I own should be hektish, and he doesn't break it down between animals and possessions. Kedivi Rebbe Yoshua, hamakdish beferish kedivi Rebbe Eliezer. So I'm sorry, someone's makdish beferish. He says that my animals and my possession should be hektish. So he's talking it out. He's saying my animals and my possession should be hektish. I want them to be all treated the same way. He's talking it out. I have animals, I have tables and chairs, I have jewelry, I have a computer, everything's hektish. Oh, he's talking it out like that. Well, there's only one way that animals can be hektish along with a computer. The same way you sell the computer, you have to sell the animals. So if someone talks it out, he mamish talks it out, the animals are hektish, my possessions are hektish, he means that he wants whatever's done with his possessions to be done with the animals, and therefore everything is sold for the bedek habayis. In that case, we hold like Rebbe Eliezer. When he's mafaresh and he says the animals, the computers, the jewelry are hektish, we understand from his words that he means the animal should be just like the jewelry. You're going to sell the jewelry, sell the animals. In that case, the halacha is like Rebbe Eliezer. V'hamakdish stam. But in the case we've been talking about, a person says everything is hektish. Then it's Rebbe Yeshua. Then we're going to pass like Rebbe Yeshua. If he says everything is hektish, what do you mean? If it's a table, you sell it. If it's an animal, make it a carbon. He didn't spell anything out. In the first case, he said the jewelry, the animals, the table, they're all hektish. Okay, so he's talking about one form of hektish. The same way you're going to sell the computer, you're going to sell the animals. There the halacha is like Rebbe Eliezer. But if someone says everything's hektish, then what he means is hektish. This is sellable. This goes to the mizbeach. Everything is its own type of hektish. That's what Rab Papia says, that it's possible to hold like both shittas in different cases. The halacha, however, is like Rebbe Eliezer, the first sheet in the Mishnah, that when someone says everything I own is hektish, everything gets sold, including the animals. The money goes to the gizbar for upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. The only thing is, when we sell the animals to be used as karbonos by somebody else. Male animals for an olah, female animals for a shlomim. But Reuven's, all his donation turned into money and went to the Beis Hamikdash. None of it went as his own carbon. Somebody else bought it as a carbon. The halacha is like Rebbe Eliezer. Now, why is the halacha like Rebbe Eliezer? Because in the middle of the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva said, I understand Rabbi Eliezer better than I understand Rabbi Yeshua. So here we have the first Mishnah we learned. Somebody raised a question, we answered it. In the first Mishnah about someone being makdish, everything he owns, and he has certain spices for ketoris in there. It was a machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer's shortcut. Rabbi Akiva's shortcut. And Ben Azai said you need to do the 4-step process, and there we paskin in a most unusual way against Rabbi Akiva. We paskin like Ben Azai, who is 1 against 1, and we should paskin Rabbi Akiva, on top of which Ben Azai is Rabbi Akiva's Talmud. Nevertheless, in that Mishnah we paskin like Ben Azai. In the next Mishnah, we're going to paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. Why are we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer? because Rabbi Akiva said, I think Rabbi Eliezer makes more sense. So in the first Mishnah, we went against Rabbi Akiva and paskin like Rabbi Akiva's own student Ben Azai. And in this Mishnah, we're going to paskin according to Rabbi Eliezer, simply because Rabbi Akiva said, I think he's right. Okay. Those are the two Mishnayos. And there's one more Mishnah Hashem will do on Yom Rishon about Makdish Nechasim. And somebody raised the issue, what happens if there's wine, oil, etc. amongst the Nechasim? And then again, the last Mishnah will not be a direct Makdish HaShekel Mishnah of this parak. And then what we've all been waiting for since Masechta Midos and Masechta Tamid, but getting a Masechta Midos, we talked about the Mamunah, the person who used to go around the Beis HaMikdash checking to make sure that the guards weren't asleep. And then we learned the Masechta Tamid about all the different supervisors, the supervisor of the lottery and the supervisor who made sure the Kohanim woke up. Yeah, Hashem, next week we're going to be in Perek Hey of Masechta Shekalim. We're going to learn the identity of every single one of the 15 supervisors in the Beis HaMikdash, what their jobs were. And if you want to have a sneak preview, you can take a look at page 36 of your Mishnah Behira. At the bottom of the page, there's a chart of all 15 names and what their jobs were in the Beis HaMikdash. We'll see that next week.